This week, the Trump administration moved to eliminate some of the most landmark climate change research on the dangers of greenhouse gases. The so-called endangerment finding has been called the holy grail of climate science and was laid out by the Obama administration in 2009. It's used to set greenhouse gas emissions from cars, factories, power plants, and other sources of climate pollution. This marks the Trump administration's boldest attack yet on climate change regulations. Joining us now, science writer and New York Times opinion writer David Wallace Wells. And David, you're also the author of The Uninhabitable Earth: Life After Warming. David, the endangerment finding has become the main way that the U.S. regulates greenhouse gas emission to fight climate change. What do you see as the possible implications of this EPA move?
Well, the implications for American climate policy are pretty grim, but I think that even in the absence of this action, the Trump administration was not going to be moving quickly to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I think the bigger message is about the kind of care or lack thereof that the whole Magosphere shows for the future of the planet's climate and the country's environment. And I think you see that damage being done not just here with this new news, but all throughout the EPA's actions over the last few months, where they're pulling back restrictions on lead and mercury and, making sure that nobody's even going to be able to monitor the stuff that's in tap water. Almost everywhere you look, the administration is acting to put more pollution into the environment, to damage the lives and health of more Americans, even though, of course, it's not like there are any voters out there who are clamoring for more pollution. And in fact, one of the constituencies that brought Trump back into power was the MAHA movement, which was dedicated to the exact opposite proposition, that we should be cleaning up our environment rather than dumping more toxins and pollutants into it.
This announcement came from EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin on a conservative podcast. He said that the decision really comes down here to dollars and cents. He said, quote, "There are people who, in the name of climate change, are willing to bankrupt the country." Does he have a point there? Is there a financial implication to this?
Well, anytime that the government is regulating anything, there are distortions in the market as a result. And one can make an argument that the previous administration had put a dollar figure on the what's called the social cost of carbon that was really quite high. The figure that they settled on actually implied that the U.S. was doing about $1 trillion of global climate damages every year through the production of carbon. But a response to that might have been to reduce that estimate, as Trump actually did in his first term, rather than eliminating the basis on which it was made at all. This is not a sign that we were overestimating the cost of climate change. It's a sign that this administration has absolutely no interest in thinking about climate change as a problem at all. And in fact, Zeldin has now said several times that we need to be thinking a little bit more about the benefits of carbon dioxide to the planet, which is, a really unfortunate talking point from the climate denier, right?
Clearly, environmental activists will be enraged by this. Could this rollback actually face legal challenges? And if so, who might initiate them?
Personally, I'm not all that hopeful about legal challenges on any of these points. I think there will be challenges, but ultimately that decision will be made by the Supreme Court, and they've shown at almost every opportunity that they are very much on board for Trump's deregulatory agenda, especially as it relates to the dangers of climate change. This wouldn't be the first time that the Supreme Court held in support of the Trump administration against the desire and wishes of climate activists and advocates. If it comes to that again, I wouldn't be surprised if they once again side with Trump's EPA and the impulse to allow more damage to be done to the planet, to the country, and to the people who live in it.
So after we see a deregulation like this, a rollback, how difficult is it to then reinstate it later down the road?
Well, one thing, it'll hang a little bit on the legal challenges and how those shake out. We don't know exactly the lay of the land that would await a future Democratic administration. In theory, it wouldn't be all that hard, but it may be the case that as this is contested and fought over the next months and years, the legal landscape would be prescribed in such a way that future administrations would be able to do less on this front than previous administrations had. And that will be quite damaging, not just because the principle itself is important, the regulations that flow from it are so critical, but because we are now in a political situation where it's hard to imagine large-scale legislative action on climate change. And so some of these administrative actions are sort of the strongest tools we have left in our toolkit. If we can't count on them being re-implemented in the future, then we're really in a tough spot.
An examination by the Associated Press found that the EPA targeted rules could prevent an estimated 30,000 deaths. You mentioned MAHA a little bit earlier. Does eliminating these contradict the goal of the MAHA movement and all that RFK Jr. has been championing? I know you alluded to that, but expand on it for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think, on some level, if RFK Jr. was the head of the EPA, we'd be having kind of an opposite policy agenda there. It happens that he's the head of HHS managing vaccines, which I think is a separate disaster. But these are two completely contradictory impulses. On the one hand, you have people who want to, at least in theory, clean up the environment, protect people from environmental contamination and harm. And on the other hand, at the EPA, basically do the bidding of big corporations who want the freedom to pollute as freely as they can without even strong oversight from agencies that used to observe and monitor all of this pollution. So I think we have basically two coalitions that have diametrically opposed impulses. And unfortunately, we're seeing that in the Trump administration, here as on many other fronts, when there are conflicts, they tend to side with the impulses of big business, showing themselves to be less of a new coalition devoted to a new set of conservative principles than somewhat like the old Republican playbook, simply wanting to enable the most powerful people and corporations in our country to do damage as they see fit.
David Wallace Wells, thank you so much for joining us.